Woo, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star here. And boy, back in the Magic Studio, or should I say the BDSM Studio, which stands for Brian's Dungeon of Sex and Magic. But this studio really is, well, there isn't really magic, but for what we use the term for metaphorically, I do feel that this studio is truly magic. So much happens in here, so many wonderful things, so many wonderful ideas come to mind, and so much gets created. But anyway, speaking of things that were created, if you hadn't gotten a copy yet, I implore you, link is in the show notes for it, get a copy of Sovereign Universe Volume 1. I guarantee you a good time. A good time. So a sexy time at that. But actually, just got back from, in fact, I'm going to record a little episode about it. Went to a spa of sorts, I guess you could say. I've done reviews of when I would go to Kripalu, which is a yoga retreat. This place is kind of a retreat. In fact, it's just down the street from Kripalu in the Berkshires, that being Canyon Ranch. I just went there over the past few days. And that's why things might have been a little quiet on the Patreon front. It's interesting. Let's just put it that way. I'm going to record a little episode about it and give you a bit of a review of the place, because I have some thoughts, maybe sociological thoughts, philosophical thoughts, as far as that place goes. Very interesting. I mean, I had a good time. I certainly had a good time. Very different than Kripalu. Anyway, so I'll save that for to talk about that another time. If you noticed this week on Sovereign Tech Prime that there were segments again, but like they didn't necessarily have any intros. I got some stuff that I'm working on. Let's just put it that way. And for right now that's how that's going to be sitting. But don't worry, the sexy is not going to be gone for very long. So I do have some stuff planned for that. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about it. Not going to get into detail or anything along those lines. If you want to get some Sovereign Tech sexy right now, like I said, you pick up a copy of Sovereign Universe Volume 1. So, all right, why don't we go ahead and start getting into our questions for your Sovereign Tech Patreon only Wednesday Q&A. Don't forget that on, I believe it is this Friday being the... Oh, let's see. That's the 24th, the 24th. This Friday the 24th at 4 p.m. Will be the live Q&A hangout that we will do. And also the Star Wars updates coming up real soon. Got the Star Trek updates. Still have a Relationship Rhombus show to get to. We got all kinds of stuff to talk about. It's going to be a great time. Lots of episodes to come out for Patreon only this month is the bottom line. But all right, let's get into our questions. And I got a couple technical ones here, and actually most of them are kind of technical, so we'll get into that. But here we go. So this is the first one. Did I hear you say you play your Nintendo 3DS with your Oculus Rift? If so, how does that work? Okay, so this comes in a couple different parts, this section, or this question. First off, I'm not sure when I might have said that, but I didn't say that. I think I might have at one point. I talked about how you can play like classic Nintendo games in 3D on a VR headset. There is software for that, but I don't play my 3DS on my I have an Oculus Go, which is separate from the Rift. So I might have miscommunicated that somehow. I could totally see how I would have, because talking about something being played in 3D, and then I talk about my 3DS often enough because I think it's the best game console out there right now, though the Switch is coming up fast. Whew, I'm going to get my hands on one of those at some point here, but maybe when I have time to actually play another game system. How about that? But regardless, so no, I don't know of a way to do that. I wish I did, because, well, anyway, yeah, the 3DS, it's still a valid system. In fact, they just announced that the re-release of Luigi's Mansion for the 3DS, which is originally a GameCube game, that's coming out middle of October. I think like October 12th. I am all over that. Of course, the sequel to that, Dark Moon, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, came out for the 3DS a few years ago, and that was a badass game. So can't wait for this, to play this again. I wish they'd put Super Mario Sunshine on the system. Maybe they'll do that next year. I don't know. They said they're not planning on stopping the 3DS anytime soon. It's a cartridge-based system, and all the games can be played in 2D. So really, there's no reason you can't exactly emulate it, or at some point emulate it. But yeah, as it stands right now, you can't really do that with VR, as far as I know. So yeah, I might have miscommunicated that somewhere, but no, I don't do that. So let's go on to the rest of the question here. I also would like to hear you talk in a little bit more detail about watching movies in VR, if you feel like it. A while back, I watched a few episodes of Babylon 5, whoo, right on, baby, with Google Cardboard. It was cool, but I know the quality could be so much better. I love the idea of hanging up my do not disturb, woo, hailstorm. That's what the emailer said. I would have said that too. Sign and watching everything in a theater in VR and some noise canceling headphones and just getting lost in another world. I'm a patron, so if you cover this, I will hear it wherever. Okay, yeah, because this got sent into my email address at bbs@sovereigntech.com. Yeah, do not disturb, baby. That is the hottest fucking song. That song's getting a ton of press from Hailstorm. You know, people saying, oh, you know, rock has finally grown up about sex and all this, about, you know, group sex and whatever. I mean, hey, great. I think rock's been grown up about that for a very long time, but whatever. If it gives Hailstorm and heavy metal some press, I'm not going to complain about it. But yeah, put up the do not disturb sign and go for it. Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about this. And we have a question that's related to something we talked about in the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week. And then we've got another one about police cameras that we're going to get into here. So I'm not going to talk all gaming, but or, you know, entertainment necessarily. But let's get into this. So my thoughts on watching movies in VR. Okay, there's that Skybox player, which I talked about on a Q&A hangout a little while back, that works on the Oculus Go. So my VR equipment that I own, that I have personally, is all I have is the Oculus Go as far as it goes. I also have Google Cardboard, yes, but once you start using the Oculus Go, Google Cardboard becomes very superfluous. So I don't generally mess with that. But anyway, I have the Oculus Go. There's others, like there's Big Screen. There's some other ones that are trying to make watching movies on a VR headset to be like more of a social thing, which is where I've said this many times, where I think it needs to get. And also, let me say again that for years on Sovereign Tech, I have been saying the only thing I actually want, that I actually want these VR headsets and whatever to do, or one of the main things I want them to do is I want to put on the VR headset, get lost in a 1980s theater and watch like 1980s or 60s and 70s movies. Okay. And maybe have other kind of people around if I can and sort of share the experience. Okay. And right now, I mean, like even just with the Oculus Go, which is probably the, not necessarily lowest end spec wise, but lowest end headset, like readily available and certainly on price. I mean, $200 for, more or less a standalone unit. I mean, that's pretty incredible. Just with that and with a app that's in beta, that being Skybox Player, it's incredible just how great an experience you already get. Like I said, with the Skybox Player, with the app, when you're watching a movie, like lighting affects the seats, in the theater that you're sitting in, because it puts you in like a literal virtual theater that you can look around. You can even look behind you and see the projector and all that, the virtual projector. And I mean, it's really impressive. It's not like 100% what I want, but it's like 85% of what I've wanted as far as watching movies in VR. And, the screen's huge and you can change the size and all this different stuff. And there's a lot of advantages with it. For one is that the Skybox Player specifically, as long as your Oculus Go is connected to your home network, where your network area storage is, where your NAS is, it connects to my NAS instantly. And so I can just put movies on the NAS and I can stream them. I don't even have to install them onto the Oculus Go. Now you can also locally put them onto the Oculus Go, because the Oculus Go, depending upon which model you get, has 32 gig or 64 gig of onboard storage. Plenty of room for some movies. Okay. But I generally can just toss them on the NAS. The Skybox Player also has a PC app that you can install that will allow you access, or that will allow you to play pretty much any movie that's on your PC or connected to your PC or whatever. The one flaw, the one thing that I don't really have an app for, and this is to speak more about watching movies in VR if you want me to give you detail, is that, I can't watch my Blu-rays straight to VR, which I'd really like to be able to do that. Skybox might be able to do that in the future, but I don't know if they'd be able to, because you got to pay for the license. I mean, there's tricks like VLC. There's a trick to where you can potentially play Blu-rays inside VLC media player, but it's it's a heavy duty trick and you have to keep updating the libraries and everything. It's a pain in the ass. Pretty much what Skybox would have to do is they'd probably have to come out with like a like $50 or $80 version of the app that would pay for the license to officially play Blu-ray movies. Okay, and then maybe they could do something where you could play a Blu-ray straight from the Skybox app on your PC, connecting to your disk drive, to your optical drive, to a Blu-ray drive of some kind. Okay, that's more or less what would have to happen to allow for that. So there's a good bet that it's never going to happen. So a lot of times I have to convert movies down if I want like a really great copy made with a Blu-ray player. Now, again, I've talked about this before and I'll say it again. No VR headset out there today can do better than 720p. So having a Blu-ray having 1080p effectively is not the point. And there's no point to having like 4K content or 1080p content. You can only watch you're only going to get 720p. Anything more is just burning battery and, burning lumens. Well, not lumens, but you get my point. It's just pointless. Okay. I guess you could say burning pixels, but, yeah. So now, but I think your question really more is what's the abstract experience like? How do I enjoy that? I like it a lot. I really, watching things in Skybox is, with the Oculus Go, you really get lost. Like you really get lost, but it's only if it's something that I want to watch on my own. Like if it's something I want to watch with others, with other people, watch something with the ladies, whatever, then, you can't do that with a VR headset. Okay. And so if it's a shared experience, obviously I'm not doing it with that. But like if I want to watch Voltron, I'll pop it on and, watch the latest episodes of Voltron, which we've got the review season 7 now. That's going to be coming up soon. It works very, very well for that. And I do get lost. Like I really do. It is so easy to forget that you are in a virtual world when you do that. And if you were somebody, like if I was living alone, if I was living totally alone, I would probably watch just about everything in VR because it is such an immersive experience. And the beauty of that too, and I might have, some of this I might have said before, but I'm just sharing with you, what it's like to watch a lot of this stuff. Okay. For a more immersive, one of the problems we have today is that unlike when I was growing up, so understand I watched a shit ton of TV, and I mean a shit ton of TV, especially when I was a teenager, but even younger. I watched so much television. You have no idea. I went to so many movies. I was just... there was a screen in my face. Kind of all the time. Like it was so nuts, but I had the free time, my life was such a way that like I had that kind of free time, not just because I was a teenager. All right. But the thing was at the time, like cell phones weren't real, or smartphones weren't a thing. There were cell phones, but you couldn't really, you're lucky if you could play a game of Snake on them. And I had, in the late 90s, like I had a cell phone, but that's all it was a cell phone. I didn't have, smartphones weren't a thing yet. You could get it like a Palm, a Palm device, Palm 1 or Trio or whatever. But anyway, regardless of any of that, when you sat down to watch something, generally you were sitting down and watching something, or hell, if you're a kid, maybe you're watching something while building Legos. I don't know. Okay. But more or less this idea of, people did have stuff in the background while they were cleaning the house or cooking or something like that. The idea of things be playing in the background isn't new necessarily, but you could concentrate more on what was happening on the screen, and you did concentrate more on what was happening on the screen because it was still a rarer experience and there weren't fucking screens everywhere. As much as I could always have a screen on my face, that's only because I chose to do that and sit down and do so, as to where, now it doesn't matter if you're sitting down, standing, running, whatever, there's just fucking screens everywhere. Okay. Even if you're shitting, there's screens everywhere. So at the time, like you took it in more, you could part of the reason I can remember so many things, pre 2007, I guess, or maybe pre 2011. I didn't get into the smartphones until a little bit later than some other people. Or than most people, I guess. But, with VR, my point in saying this is VR forces you to pay attention to what's going on because the Oculus Go doesn't have any notifications whatsoever. I kind of wish it did in a way, because if someone's away and you're kind of, we've sort of been trained to like hear from people instantly. And then that's something I want to get over at some point, but well, anyway, that's something I'm still working on in my own head, and that we all are, I think, in a very real way. But regardless, so, there's no notifications, there's no bullshit, there's no distractions, et cetera, and you're just immersed in what you're actually watching. And VR movies, watching movies in VR and TV in VR really brings you back to that. And it's a beautiful thing. When I can really say, I guess I'm saying it anecdotally, but for me, I feel like there was way more of an experience when I watch something in VR compared to when I'm watching it any other way, on any other screen, be it a TV, computer, whatever. The only other, also when I go to, it's similar to when I actually go to a movie theater. When I go to a movie theater, like I really remember the experience of the movie, much like I do when I watch it in VR, as compared to when I'm watching it at home and I get up and, get a drink and I go and do other things and blah, blah, blah. Like you get really, really immersed and you get to take the content in. And one could argue that that's more respectful for the art to do it that way, to watch it that way, And the other thing is that because it is such a realistic experience to watch the stuff in a theater, when I was speaking again of when I was a teenager, and this might only mean something to people if you had these similar desires when you were younger, and if maybe you're around my age or maybe a little older or something, okay, which I'm 37. Like I wanted to see everything in a movie theater. Like I used to dream about that. I remember like even as a little kid looking through the Radio Shack catalog, be like, a projector. I could have a theater in the house. This could be amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to watch everything. I want to watch Star Trek. It's like, yeah, one day I'm going to watch Star Trek episodes in a movie theater, This is the interesting thing with a VR headset. Like it really makes you want to not only immerse yourself in the content that you're watching, but it really makes you want to re-experience a lot of the classics and a lot of other movies. And that's a beautiful thing in itself because you are taking it in a whole new way. And there's movies that I've watched in VR that I hadn't watched in some years. And now that I rewatch them in VR, like sometimes they've taken on whole new meanings. Now you could say it's because I'm a new person now, right, years later, and that maybe I see things differently. But I think it has more to do with experiencing it on the big screen, or on the virtual big screen, as compared to just watching it on a television. Because also, if you're my age, this is another thing to understand, okay? And this is kind of a funny thing. Like people don't see the difference now, but there used to be a huge difference here. Actors, okay? Let's take. I'm just going to pick a name out of a hat here. Sean Connery, okay? Maybe a bad example. Al Pacino. All right, let's do Al Pacino. How about that? In the 90s and even in the early aughts. Okay, and then any time before that, any decades before that. For an actor, say like Al Pacino, who, has a string of movie hits, of cinematic hits, not television, cinema, okay, cinematic hits, it would have been anathema for him to do a television show. Even on HBO, it would have been anathema for him to do that, okay? If to do an ad, unless it was in Japan where it was commonplace. In America, for a big name movie actor like Al Pacino, before let's say 2010, for him to do a commercial of some kind that's on TV, unheard of. It would have been unheard of because you didn't soil yourself that way as an actor. That there was a clear separation. There used to be a clear separation between actors that were in movies and actors that were on TV. Now, sometimes TV actors got big enough to where they got to play with the big stars in movie theaters. But that didn't always happen, okay? But it never went the other way around, where, a movie actor would necessarily get demoted unless he got really old, like Stacy Keach or something like that, where they'd end up, getting demoted down to doing television movies or a television series or something like that. But that didn't happen. Now, though, now it doesn't matter. People they'll do a Netflix show, then they'll do a Hollywood movie the next week. This guy will do commercials and all that. And it's no big deal and there's no real difference. That separation doesn't really exist anymore. But if you grew up with that separation, you either consciously, maybe you knew this before I told it to you, but maybe this is you realizing it for the first time if you're around my age. Because if you grew up when that separation existed between the silver screen and the TV screen, okay, like there is an unconscious difference between seeing something in a theater and seeing something on TV. When it's seen on TV, it is instantaneously, unconsciously seen as lesser, right? I mean, just look at Game of Thrones. How many people made a huge deal out of Game of Thrones because, it looked like it had a movie budget. It looked so good because looked like it was something out of the movies. That's because that's still a product of that separation that existed for so long that really doesn't exist anymore. I mean, now TV shows can look as good as movie theaters any day of the week. I mean, now again, there's no more lines as far as that goes. There's no separation at all. Okay. But for me and for people my age or around my age, there's still that separation. And so when you watch even like a TV show, hell, I was watching Star Trek, the animated series on my Oculus Go. When I watch that on the big screen, like it means more. It just unconsciously means more, and I remember it better. And I really do. I mean, it's really, and it's not like those aren't things I haven't seen a ton of times, but like it just, and you see new things and you're paying attention more. It's just a very different way of watching things. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's superior. Like I said, we're a social species. Okay. And if you want to share the content, that you're viewing, well, VR isn't exactly up to snuff for that right now. If it's just you living single, like I said, I'd probably watch shit that way all the time. And the other beautiful thing is that you don't have to have a TV. You can just have your little headset. And you can leave that headset plugged into, even an Oculus Go that has like unfortunately only 2.5 hour battery life. You could just leave it plugged in and you could watch, if you want to watch the 5-hour version of Lord of the Rings or whatever, go for it. Okay. So if I were single, I'd probably do that all the time. But then, of course, if I was wanting to, have some gals over or whatever, I'd probably want a TV if I want to have the shared experience of watching media with them. Okay. So it's really, you can only get away with just watching things on a VR headset if you plan on staying single, more or less, or if you just don't plan on watching, movies or TV shows or playing video games or whatever, with someone, someone that maybe you're romantically interested in or just someone that you have as a friend. Yeah. So, I mean, those are my thoughts on watching movies, in VR. I think it's a powerful experience. It's a really powerful experience. And it points at just how powerful an experience VR can be for all kinds of things, not just for entertainment, but for therapy, I mean, like medical applications. I think there's very real medical applications that can be done with VR. And again, it's just a very immersive and powerful experience. And you can feel it with entertainment and art, and I think you could feel it in other areas too. And I hope that eventually we stretch more into that. But yeah, I mean, it is awesome, to watch, especially like when you watch Star Wars. I mean, I fortunately was old enough, and I mean that seriously. I feel fortunate. I was fortunate enough that in '97, when the special editions of the Star Wars trilogy came out, that I got to go see those in theaters, because it was the truth. When that Star Destroyer in A New Hope, when that movie opens up and the Star Destroyer comes up overhead, when you see that on the big screen, your jaw drops. You go, what the fuck? Even then, and even today, and I've watched the Star Wars all the Star Wars movies on my Oculus Go. It still hits you so much harder. Like, that is the way to fucking experience Star Wars. I've even watched Star Wars Rebels on there and Clone Wars, and especially when you watch Clone Wars, that show hits you even harder when you're watching it on a big screen, because I think that has a very cinematic feel anyway. So yeah, the Oculus Go, it's time and place. If you're alone, and I mean, and it's great for when you're traveling, because you can just toss it into your bag and pull it out whenever you need it. But yeah, I mean, there's some things that I think should be watched that way, and that's the most inexpensive and most immersive way to do it. And it kind of forces you to pay attention, which I think is really, there's a real advantage to that. So, okay, let's get on to another question here. Got a little more gaming here, which actually has to do with the game talk that we covered this week, which this is getting this conversation around ROMs, quote unquote illegal ROMs, of which a ROM is an image of a game, like say a cartridge-based game, an NES or NES, SNES, Genesis, whatever, that you could play on an emulator on another system. Okay, say on a PC, on your smartphone, or on some of these like system clones that exist, and so on. Okay, So let's see here. It says, "Hi Brian, with Nintendo's." This was asked on in the community tab on the Patreon page, which I love when people use that. A lot of action going on there recently. "Hi Brian, with Nintendo's horrible move to shut down ROM sites like MU Paradise, I'm wondering what to do if I want to find ROMs for old systems. Do you have any leads on good alternative ROM sites that have a wide array of games and not just for the classic NES, SNES?" or NES, SNES, however we're going to pronounce those, etc. systems. I'd love to see GameCube/Wii and more obscure systems too. Thanks. Okay, so some of these weren't always accessible through a lot of different websites anyway. Let's talk about this. Okay, for example, GameCube and Wii actually has a great emulator called Dolphin, which it has the name Dolphin because Dolphin was one of the original code names for, I guess that would have been, was it 6th or 7th generation Nintendo consoles? Yeah, I think that was them before Revolution. Like, that was just before Revolution with Dolphin. So I guess that would have been more or less the Wii, or maybe it's the GameCube. Anyway, it's sad because so many of these, for game systems, so many of the code names that these systems had are eons better than the name that they actually come up with, or that they actually end up releasing. So anyway, but GameCube and Wii, there's the Dolphin, which is an awesome emulator that's pretty much cross-platform. They even have it for Android, that can play most GameCube and most Wii games, as well as some of the WiiWare games, which were, the ones that were only available via download. Which that's a very real thing, right? To want ROMs for, because the Wii store shut down and you had to download all your games to your Wii. And, and it's bad enough that the Wii had practically no memory on it, to where if you had a lot of games, you probably couldn't even install all of them onto your system. I mean, that's a real problem. It's one of the things that points at why we need ROMs in the first place. Okay. But, yeah, so downloading those, but like getting whole GameCube games, which, yes, they were mini CDs, right? They had the really small CD form factor. Even though they were mini CDs, they were still taking up quite a few hundred megabytes. And most websites weren't just going to let you download a few hundred megabytes, off of their, shared server or whatever. Okay. So a lot of games you still needed to go to torrent sites to be able to get access to them. You had to go to Demonoid, which, by the way, Demonoid looks like they solved their problems. It was getting ugly there for a little while. There is, in fact, in particular, and maybe you can find this elsewhere, but I know it's at Demonoid, demonoid.pw. If you type in Golden Age of video games, you're going to end up with, like, they have Age of the Cartridge. Like, there's a bunch of different torrents. There's Age of the Cartridge. There's a MAME one. There's a bunch of them. And then there's, like, disc ones where it is these, sometimes, depending upon it, I mean, it could be 14, 15, however many gig. I mean, just crazy sizes. But they're torrents of all of the games for various systems and everything. So torrent sites have really always been the best solution for this anyway. And that includes not just for ROMs, but things that are technically ROMs, even though they may be of new games made, like to get, like various, what was there, the Pokemon Uranium, right? Like some of these fan-made games that Nintendo has also been an asshole about. And look, as much as I love Nintendo, I'm happy to call an asshole when they're an asshole, and they are assholes for what they've been doing with all this. I understand why they're doing it. I don't agree with them. I think it's fucking terrible. They don't have to worry about it. They're going to make their money. The Nintendo faithful are going to lay the money down. It's not a concern. Nintendo's getting really greedy. I might talk about that a little more in a second, but I want to keep going on this track. So anyway, some of those games, like the best ways to always get them was torrenting, because you can't really shut that down. Not really. And hopefully in the future, using various, or at least if not Tron, maybe the abstract idea of Tron, which is Tron is a blockchain technology. Maybe we can get to where all this stuff is really decentralized, and then, we don't have to worry about anything ever getting shut down unless they turn off the power grid, which, well, that's a whole other, fucking can of worms. But regardless of that, torrent sites are really always the way that right now is the way that's going to get solved. Now, there is some conversation around the idea that there's a legal loophole where if you could create a system, and you'd have to make a computer system of some kind, that had the actual, and this is the legal loophole that people are discussing of how to fix this. Of course, what'll happen is, I mean, the gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You think they can't buy lobbying power to where they can shut this kind of shit down? Of course they can. But this is an idea that's floating around, is that you would hook up to a server. You would hook up all these cartridges and maybe even CDs, I don't know, and they would be connected to the server. And then you could go to the website, and boy, don't even begin to tell me how expensive this would be. You would go to the website that the server, that the server's hosting, and as requested, you could effectively, like, as long as the ROM is the legal cartridge, not the ROM, the legal cartridge, say like somebody had Super Mario Brothers connected to a server, the actual cartridge, you could download the ROM rip from that server, because that server is connected to the actual legal copy of the game. And then there's no, like, then how can they shut you down? You are connected to legal copies of the game. I mean, it's not like a crazy technical leap, but that is a really like hardcore technical solution that you'd have to do just to keep from getting shut down. Now, is preserving art and making art accessible to people for all eternity, that important to make it worthwhile to do such an expensive and wild setup? Absolutely yes. Of course it's important enough. Art's everything. But is anybody going to be able to pull that off? That's a whole other question. What's the likelihood of that? I mean, then we're getting into some weird territory. But that's an idea that's kind of floating around to be able to preserve this art. So, yeah, I mean, really, the main solution to go for is just to, hit up the torrent sites. Other sites are going to pop up. Like, retro gamers are just such a passionate, dare I say, social class of people that, you can't stop them. You just can't stop them. I mean, they're the same people that are causing this recent mini retro console system craze with the, NES Mini or NES Classic, SNES Classic, and so on, even the Commodore 64 Mini and so on. The same people that are making those sell in the millions and that are lining up to buy them as they come out, at physical stores, or shutting down Amazon in so doing. Look, do you think people that are that passionate about shit are going to let Nintendo stop them from sharing their ROM files? Fuck no. You're never going to stop these people, because retro gaming is powered very much, and this isn't a bad thing. There are people who treat this as a bad thing because there are people who bastardize this and use it as kind of emotional blackmail. Okay, when it comes to movies like Ghostbusters and whatever else, okay? But look, nostalgia is a very real thing, and it is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. There's a reason that it even happens in our minds, okay? I dare say it evolved for a good reason, all right? And nostalgia is it's a very powerful motivator, and it's something that gives us, great rewards, sometimes with very little effort and all that. And if the purpose of life is to be happy, why would you say nostalgia is a bad thing? It's not. And that's a very powerful driver for a lot of people to want to, and because appealing to nostalgia, okay, and this has very broad ramifications that people don't consider, I don't think, but it's certainly a major part of the retro gaming community, and I recognize it in myself. Appealing to nostalgia is a way of controlling your reality, all right? Because if you can keep the world at a certain year or date that you remember fondly, then in a very real way, you are bringing, when you play, I'd pick your game. I don't know. When you play Legend of Zelda from 87 or 80 or whatever, okay, you are very much mentally, you're very much back in 1987, and your brain will feed, in a sense, the dopamine, will feed the chemicals that'll make you feel that way again. And that's not a bad thing. It's important to recognize what it is, but that's not a bad thing in and of itself. Okay, now if you use that as justifications to ruin somebody's career, well, I mean, that's a whole different fucking ballgame, right? Okay, but in and of itself, innocently, it's a wonderful damn thing. But you really are doing that. And, I support that all the way. And are people going to go for that fix? And are they, going to want to do whatever it takes to have that? Yes, yes, yes. And that's not even getting into the argument around retro gaming, that the games themselves were actually designed in a very superior fashion. And that, to play great games, you're going to want to play these games again, or for the first time. And there's certainly a great argument to be made around that. Okay? But retro gaming is so huge that, why is Sega coming out with their Sega Classics line, and they're like updating, hell, they're even updating like Phantasy Star 1, and they're adding the Spin Dash into Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and they're doing all this other stuff, and they're re-releasing it for the Switch, right? They're doing all that crap. Why? Because, there's a real market for this. So again, you're not going to stop people that are that passionate about it and that are willing to lay down, money all over again for these games. You're just not going to stop them. The best thing you can do is do maybe like what Sega's doing, where, okay, I'm going to give you a reason to not download the ROM. I'm going to give you a reason. I'm going to add in the Spin Dash into Sonic 1. You're going to want to play this way, and you're going to pay, $10 for it. That's how you really, if you have a problem, if you think piracy, if you think quote unquote piracy and illegal ROM downloading, again, I put that in quotes, is a problem, that's how you solve it. If you think it's cutting into your bottom line, that's how you solve it. You're going to have to give people a reason. But you're never going to stop them. You're just never going to stop them. And then, honestly, most people, it's kind of like music pirates. Like the research has been in for years that music pirates spent more money on music when music piracy was a bigger thing. Now, a lot of them are just going to Spotify. Okay. But when it was more of a thing, they would spend more money on music than the person who didn't pirate music. So who the hell do you want to make happy? Obviously the music pirates, because they're giving you more money. And that's true, I think, for a lot of retro gamers. They'll download the ROM and play the original, and then they'll compare it to, the new version, because they'll have bought the new version as well. These companies, it's hard to believe, but they just don't fucking get it. Or they just don't want to, they're so hungry, they don't want to, they don't want to let loose control. Now, that leads me quick, and then we're going to get into another question here, okay? But that leads me quick into my point I want to make about Nintendo getting greedy. So here's the thing. And I was in meetings, or I was at a dinner where I specifically heard Nintendo employees in Japan make the claim that their attitude about competition, and I've said this before, I said this years ago on Cybertech, but this is during the GameCube days, okay, just to give you some perspective. Their claim about competition is that they don't worry about competition. Now, it's not because, it's not necessarily, it is kind of a hubris, but it's not exactly hubris like, they can't do what we do or something like that. It's not like that. It's that Nintendo thought back in the GameCube days that everybody would, okay, fine, you might be arguing between Xbox and PlayStation, but all of you own a Nintendo. So their idea was that, and in Japan it was true, that everybody owned two game consoles. They owned Nintendo, and then they picked one of the other 3 or 4 that were out there. Okay, but everybody owned a Nintendo. And that's the way that they thought about things. Now, the interesting thing is that now, Nintendo's gotten, like, the Switch is so white hot, and it really is. It's so white hot that I think they, and then they also still have the 3DS, which is doing well, and they're releasing games for it and everything. Okay. They're almost competing within their own company. Like, they think that they're so dominant that they can actually make their own, they can make a multitude of systems. And they've even, Nintendo, they're like switching presidents every once in a while now, so I don't know who's in right now. But previous Nintendo president, after, Iwata-san died, rest in peace, and I mean that, previous or Nintendo presidents have even come out and said, oh yeah, there might be other systems and all this stuff going on, but that doesn't mean it's a successor to the Switch. Now Nintendo seems to have gotten to the point where they're like, no, we compete within ourselves. Like, people will choose a Switch, people will choose a 3DS, and they'll choose whatever their other system happens to be. And and why else can they feel like that? Because they're fucking the NES Classics going off the shelves, the SNES Classics going off the shelves. You can't keep them on the shelves. And so they're like, well, shit, we can just come out with all the consoles we want, and people will buy them all, or they'll pick and choose, but they'll stick within Nintendo's ecosystem. And I think that's really happening. I don't think people realize what the Switch is doing. and how it's giving really Nintendo this very real attitude. And I think that's where a lot of investor confidence is coming from. I mean, they've had their ups and downs just like any company as far as, stock prices and everything. But I think that's where a lot of their investor confidence comes from. And I think this is a point nobody's really talking about this, that Nintendo is, and I call it them getting greedy. I don't necessarily mean that. I'm just saying that they're to the point, like, that's why I think they're wanting to shut down all competition, because they can make all the consoles they want. And as far as they know, it's going to fly off the shelves. I mean, 2018, the Nintendo 3DS, how old's that system? 7, 11 years? I don't know, however many years, about 10 years. It's having a record year. You hear me? A record selling year for the Nintendo 3DS. What the fuck? And then, I mean, now the hell, they even call that the 3DS family of systems. You can get the 3DS, you can get the 2DS XL, you can get the original 2DS, and they sell all of them. It's kind of like they're pulling off an Apple, where like, okay, yeah, the iPhone X is what everybody wants, but we got the iPhone 6 for you. We'll sell you an iPhone 7. Yeah, sure, we'll sell you an iPhone 8. And you go down the list, and like, it's funny because they're all kind of the same thing, and they're all kind of offering a similar experience, but everybody sees it as like a multitude of products being available. And in a very real way, I mean, when you think of Virtual Console and Switch Online and all this different stuff, I mean, it's kind of the same situation with whatever console Nintendo decides to sell next. Whatever retro console that they're going to sell next, or whatever, if they're going to come out with not a Switch successor, but maybe a Switch partner or something like that. I mean, it's amazing that it's gotten to that point in Nintendo where they themselves can sell multiple consoles and just do crazy numbers with it, right? I mean, that's why you have a 3DS family. There's probably going to be another 3DS at some point here. There's probably going to be, I mean, will there be a genuine successor to the Switch at some point? Sure. Just like, the iPhone X is really the successor to the iPhone 8, right? But that doesn't mean that when the iPhone X2 comes out that there isn't going to be an iPhone 9. I mean, I don't know how that's all going to work out, but this is the attitude that they've gotten to, where a lot of these companies are just, they're closing up their gardens. And I'm not saying I think it's necessarily a good thing. But in Nintendo's case, I mean, hey, I'll take all the retro consoles I can get. And I love my 3DS. And I'm sure I'd love the Switch. I already do, and I don't even own one. But I think that's how this company's thinking now, and that's a very unique attitude for it to have. Maybe Sony was trying to get there, but Nintendo's actually pulling it off. So anyway, yeah, to answer again the overall question of where do we go for ROMs? Well, torrenting is, there's still plenty of that available in that way. There's the RetroShare community for Sovereign Tech. There might be something available there. I'm just saying might, because you want to be careful. And anyway, but there you have it. And there will be other options. Again, like that's kind of my whole point, is that the retro gaming community and ethos is so strong. There's no way that this stuff's going to be gone for long. And if anything, it usually comes back better than ever before, which has really always been the case. Okay, so let's get on to another question here. And this is also from the Patreon page. Would love your thoughts on this article about hacking police body cameras. Maybe you can also explain your position on body cameras. Do you support this form of roaming mass surveillance under the guise of transparency or not? Well, I clearly see how you feel about it. And the question was actually from Daryl W. Perry of fpp.cc. And so, okay, now at the article that's being talked about, there actually wasn't a whole ton in the article, but at DEF CON, there was discussion about how, the way that these body cameras are transmitting and doing whatever else and sending their data, that effectively you could, well, for lack of a better term, man in the middle of this thing, and you could like alter footage and there could be all kinds of problems, blah, 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 blah. None of that really matters, okay? Because unless, so I mean, like, yeah, sure, those hacks are very real. I'm glad that they're getting brought up. I'm glad they're being discussed, because hopefully it will put a stop to this whole idea of police body cameras, because I don't agree with them. Okay, I genuinely don't agree with them at all. And I mean, because I agree with what Daryl said here. This form of roaming mass surveillance under the guise of transparency, and yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay. Police body cameras, I know there's a lot of libertarians who are very excited about this idea. Oh, it's going to hold them accountable, blah, blah, blah. The only way that it would remotely hold them accountable, and the DEF CON hacks showed that even this could be a problem. The only way that this would remotely be allow them to be held accountable is if the video feed from the body cameras was played like in town square, wherever it happened to be used, and every quote unquote citizen was able to watch it and see it at all times live. That's the only way. If it's something that only gets used after the fact, you are always going to run into very simple problems. One of them are very simple ways that, the government and the police could screw you. One is, oh shit, I slipped and fell and it broke my police camera. God damn it. And you think that didn't happen? Actually, it has happened. There have already been cases of that going on. Okay. So that's why it needs to be a consistently live feed. Okay. Not just a feed that's like constantly getting uploaded, but it needs to be a live feed and people need to be able to see it. The other problem is, oh, gee, okay, well, it's not a live feed. Oh, we made this indestructible body camera, but, we have to, plug it in. It has a USB, micro USB or USB-C on the bottom of it. We got to plug it into police computers. Oh, shit. In the data transfer, something just went wrong. There was a glitch. And so, some unfortunate person who was probably engaging in victimless crime ends up going to jail. I have no faith in any way. Like I said, there's only one way that it would even make sense and that you could even believe that footage. To say nothing about the technologies that allow you to alter footage and all that. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But there's only one way that footage is worth its salt, and that's if everybody has free access to it live at any given moment, and that's not what's going on. But that runs into, like what Daryl said, where you really have, even then, now that's not exactly panopticon because both sides get to see it. Panopticon is when only one side gets to, see everything that's going on. Okay, but then you really do have, massive, you do have mass surveillance at that point, and that's not a good thing. Okay, that's really not a good thing. Now, people talk about the idea of covalence, right? Like David Brin talks about that in the Transparent Society. He talks about covalence where, the only way to keep the watchers, honest is to watch the watchers. And so you need to just have radical transparency where everything's known all the time. And that's the only way that we can keep an eye on things. No, sorry. Privacy is an innate part of the human condition. And there is plenty of anthropological evolutionary proof to show that. Vint Cerf is dead wrong when he says privacy is an anomaly. No, it is not. Humans have been building walls for a very, very long time before they were even farming, quite frankly. And so, you can very easily, and I could go on forever about that. There's a very easy case to be made for why privacy would seem to be absolutely innate to the human condition. All right. You can say, well, you don't want to argue from naturalism because then, should we take medicine? Should we do this? I get your point on that. Okay. But I'm just saying that privacy is something that one could argue is allowed for the upward climb of humanity. So, why strip it away from them? And, there's plenty of, then you can just get into psychological research of what happens when people don't have privacy. Oh shit. It looks like they are unhappy and constantly stressed and they die quicker and so on. Okay. Privacy is important. It is not just some banty word that we get to, that people get to toss around whenever there's a technology they don't like. It is very real, and it needs to be considered at all times, especially in the world we live in today. And so body cameras are anathema to the concept of privacy. That's bad enough, okay? What's the solution? Well, if we can't hold the police accountable, what do we do about them? Well, you fucking fire you stop using, okay. Right now, I'm not saying that the police aren't useful at moments, okay? Libertarians make a mistake with that, and it allows for sociopaths to integrate and dominate their movement. And that's a problem because sociopaths come in and say, well, they won't call the cops, because they don't believe in the cops. Okay, I don't believe in the cops either, all right? But I do believe in self-protection. And there are times where, what's within the system will get used in that sense. So I don't want to confuse people on that. But we do want to get to a world, yes, where the police, as we understand it, is no longer a thing. We want to get there. We're not there. We want to get there. That's a whole other huge fucking conversation. That's a huge conversation to have. Okay, but I'm not going to, go into that now. But the other point that I want to bring up to you, and I use this example all the time when people want to bring up the whole idea of covalence or the idea of police body cameras and so on, is that even if you have all the footage in the world And believe me, I know you're going to say, yeah, but it's plain as the nose on your face or something. It's obvious that this is what happened. This person shot this person, and that's how it went down. There's no question about it. Your Honor, lock him up. No. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. The example is, and this is one I use all the time, we're going to go back to December 23rd, 1972. Okay, and what you had was an AFC divisional playoff game in the NFL. The Immaculate Reception, it is known as. This is one of the most famous plays in sports history, not just football history, in sports history. Okay, Oakland Raiders, all right? You got the Steelers versus the Oakland Raiders. Terry Bradshaw throws the ball. All right, looks like he was trying to pass it to John Fuqua. All right. Bounces off of Fuqua, and then this is where things get weird, because it either hit Raiders safety Jack Tatum, okay, and then Steelers fullback Franco Harris comes in and picks it up and goes for a touchdown and wins the game. But the question is that, with how an interception works, or how a fumbled ball works and all that, or how a complete pass works, I should say, is that, okay, wait a minute, was Franco Harris, was the fullback actually a legal guy to pick up the ball and go, or to grab the ball and go? What exactly happened there? And there has been, this is since 1972. This has been just so it's so controversial. It's been so hotly debated for so long. New footage has come out. New photos have come out. All these things have come out. The NFL has never changed their mind on the decision, even when, and look, I've seen some of this stuff. I'm not necessarily a sports guy whatsoever, but this is an interesting case, sociological case, really, a cultural case. All right. There's some pictures and there's some video footage where seems so clear. There's no way Franco Harris had a legit ball in his hand, and that touchdown should have went. The Raiders should have won it back in 72. Okay. And this is just debated back and forth. You can have all the footage in the world. What really matters is what the authorities think. Whether it's the referees in a football game, or it's the judge, or it's the politician, or it's whoever, it's the JAG, whatever. That's what it's all about. The tribunal. I shouldn't say the JAG, that's the lawyers, but the tribunal. All the footage in the world doesn't mean shit. It's all about who gets to interpret it and who gets to say what it means. That's what it's all about. And if you think that the system, aka the police, the judges, the politicians, the blah, 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 if you think they're not going to protect their own and themselves, you're fucking high. I know that's not always a bad thing, but I'm telling you, in this case, it's a bad thing that you're high. You are high. Crazy if you think that that's worthwhile. And it's the best example in the world, because it easily shows where you can, with so much evidence that you could, and so many people watching, so many people there, it just shows the bullshit that mass surveillance is. Really, the Immaculate Reception, I'm so glad it happened in 72, because it just debunks the whole idea of covalence, mass surveillance, and so on is somehow being useful, because it just shows you what really matters. What matters is who gets to interpret the data. Now you can say, well, but all the people could finally see it and they get to make a decision, blah, blah, blah. Well, then we run into a whole kinds of problems that really the internet has brought to light, and that we're going to have to deal with. We need to start thinking about and dealing with now is you really can't, as far as what you see on a screen, you can't believe your eyes anymore. And you really can't. Because it's so easy to edit this and put a filter on this and do this and all that. That's just what consumers have. That's nothing to say what the state has. Holy fucking A. You're screwed. Don't believe a goddamn thing. That's why it kills me. These guys that want to do videos and all that stuff and get interviews with people and all a politician has to do is say, no, that's not what I said. This is what I actually said. And they send it off to Adobe, and Adobe edits the audio and whatever. And who are people going to believe? They're going to believe some asshat, okay, who, some 9/11 truther that's doing some kind of bullshit interviews, okay, with a politician. Are they going to believe him, or are they going to believe the politician? They're going to believe the politician. Appeal to authority. This is going to go on in their head. Yeah, it's a fallacy, but that's why we're in this mess, because so many people believe in those, because they fall for those fallacies. No. Body cameras, not a good idea. It's not even a good half step. In fact, if anything, it just creates more control for the system. It doesn't create more accountability. It creates more control because they get to see more, do more, and they have what in most people's eyes, most people aren't Sovereign Tech listeners. They're not saying, wait a minute, is that what's on that video really what's on that video? Is that what that really recorded? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Most people aren't critical like that. They're not questioning that. They're just going to say, well, the video shows it, fuck. And who cares? They don't know that video was edited, by somebody at the NSA. They're just going to believe it. This makes life easier. So, no, body cameras. Fuck no. Fuck no. We don't have to go into whether or not they can be cracked. I mean, just on ethics alone. Philosophically alone, it's a horrendous fucking idea. And again, it's no half measure. It's not even incremental. It's a terrible incremental idea. If you think it's an incremental step to getting to where we don't have police, no, it's not. Not even close. I just explained why. I gave you all the reasons. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is that you keep working on, here's the alternative. Self-fucking development. I don't mean to use like Christian terms. I'm an atheist, but let your light shine and inspire other people to be better people. Until it gets to the point that these kinds of institutions, like the police and whatever else, become meaningless. That's the best we can do. It's the only thing really ethically that we can do in a very real way, or hell, inform people that this can be bullshit. Explain to them why it's wrong from from the 0 point, why this is a bad idea. Make the case. Make your, make a documentary, whatever. Do all that shit. Make the fucking case. And tell them. Explain to them why. Tell your neighbor why, that this is bad from the beginning. You don't have to make it a technical issue. You can explain why this is a bad idea right from the get-go. Educate people. That's how you really solve this shit. You don't solve it by playing within the system or giving the system more cameras. Holy shit. Just mind-boggling. Anyway, okay. So, So, Daryl, thank you for that. And it's always good to get a refresher on that because I know that idea gets popular again and again where people are like, well, if we had body cameras, it'd be more accountable and police would be more peaceful and blah. No, there's no guarantees of that. And there's not even great statistics. There really isn't. Your statistics come out of like one little town in California. Okay. So, going on, let's get into our album of the week. I think that's enough for questions this week. So our album of the week, I've got kind of a classic to toss on you here. Not a new one. There wasn't like a major new release that I saw this week. And this is actually from 2002. Woo, what a year. For me, anyway. It was a hell of a year. Boy, the stories I could tell. In 2002, there was a movie based off of an Anne Rice novel. Of course, actually, it was based off of various parts of the Anne Rice vampire novels. Of course, The Vampire Lestat, which is really the book that this is more based off of. And it's Queen of the Damned. So this is the movie that came out for it. It had Aaliyah in it, which was kind of a big selling point, especially since she would die around that point. And she was like in talks to be in the Matrix trilogy as well. But then, again, she died. And but she was in it. And I love this. First off, I know this movie, like in a Citizen Kane sense, is not good. Like I understand that. But this is a movie that is total style over substance. And the style is, you could say emo, you could go down gothic, you could go down a whole kind of list of things. But I love the fucking style of this movie, and it has a tremendously dark soundtrack. Just fucking awesome. And at the time, like, they were getting the lead singers to record songs that would end up being songs for the Vampire Lestat and his band in the actual movie. And it all just came together to make this really impressive, again, style over substance product. And the soundtrack's really, I think it's really cool. Of course, he had Not Meant for Me with Wayne Static doing the singing. Forsaken, probably the best song on the soundtrack. Again, it's a soundtrack to the actual film. Okay, and most of these songs were actually in it. In fact, all the music for the movie was done by, Is his name Jonathan Davis, the guy from Korn? Like, I dig it when he's not doing Korn. Like, I'm with him. You know, this guy obviously has talent. I just don't think he puts it always on display with Korn. But Forsaken, probably the best song on there. But David Draymond, of course, of Disturbed, one of my favorite bands. You know, he does his business there, and that's an awesome song. Then you have System with Chester Bennington. Of course, you know, everybody remembers Chester. And then it goes on, and there's another Disturbed song on there. You have Down with the Sickness, of course, Static X, you know, with Cold, which Wayne Static was originally part of, and so on. I mean, it's pure early aughts, you know, late 90s, early aughts kind of rock, or if you want to call it metal. That was just really like kind of dark and droning, and I'm not always in the mood for that. But it has its time and place for me. And this soundtrack, I mean, the movie itself, I just fucking love. But this soundtrack is a good snapshot, you know, of that time frame, of that time in music. And it's almost like a greatest hits of its day, in a very real sense, at least with the tone, with the feel. If it doesn't have like the actual songs that were the greatest hits of its day, it certainly has the feel. And yeah, like, I mean, I love the song Forsaken. I think that's it's kind of cheesy, but it's a badass little song. I mean, David Draymond, anytime, he gets behind the mic, it's amazing. So I think this is worthwhile. If you've never listened to it, you want to check it out, especially if you're into bands like Disturbed and so on. This is kind of a rarity that you might not have known that they had been a part of, along with the other bands. Marilyn Manson's on there and so on. I mean, it's pretty awesome stuff. I really like it. Again, I gotta be feeling it, you know, to want to watch this. The movie itself, I'll watch that fucking anytime. I think that movie is so cool. Again, I know it's not, you know, a great written film. Some of the acting is a little odd, you know, at points. Like, I get all of that. But stylistically, it is amazing. I mean, it's in some ways, I would almost call it like a vampire version, even though The Matrix would have its own kind of vampires within it. A vampire version of The Matrix in a way. Like, I mean, it has that same vibe, same feel to it, even though it's nowhere near as like philosophically or culturally groundbreaking as The Matrix was. So, I mean, what is? You know, The Matrix is just some of the best stuff ever made, the whole trilogy. So yeah, Queen of the Damned, the soundtrack, definitely, I mean, easily, you know, I could put that on my on certain top 10 lists anytime. I usually, and it's funny too, because I actually usually hate movie soundtracks that are songs as compared to the actual score, the instrumental score, right? I usually hate those. And oftentimes they were just like marketing, and some of the songs, like maybe one or two songs on the album, would actually be in the movie. Most of these, or quite a few of these songs, were actually in the film. So that's one thing going for it. But again, it is such a great little collection, and a snapshot of its time. You know, we were talking earlier about nostalgia, how, you know, when you like listen to this music or you play these games or you watch that movie, it can actually take you back to that time. I really feel this is one of those things that can easily take you back to, like, you know, 2000, 2002 and so on. And it's worth it for that. And I love to work out to it too. It's actually a great album for working out. I mean, really intense. So anyway, yeah, Queen of the Damned from 2002, the movie soundtrack, totally recommend it. The score is great as well. If you can ever get your hands on that, that's worthwhile too. But definitely the soundtrack with the songs, can't go wrong. So anyway, that is it for your Wednesday Q&A. And I don't know if we'll have another one in August. Oh yeah, no, we'll have one more in August coming up next week, and then it's on to September, where we'll see what we can make happen. But anyway, that's it for this week, and of course, so many episodes to come out on Patreon this month still. Even though I know, what is it, like the 22nd? Believe me, there's going to be like an episode every day for the next few days. So for the rest of the month. So that is it. I will see all of you on the other side.